My name is Sarah, and I have a story to share with you. It's not just a story, it's something important for everyone. It's about a person who understands English but finds it hard to speak it. You might wonder why it's so important to hear this story. Well, English is used all over the world. We need it at work, school, when traveling, and even while making new friends. Sometimes people understand the words but feel shy or nervous to say them out loud. This story is for those people. Please listen closely from start to finish. There is so much to learn. Once upon a time, in a small town, there lived a boy named Ethan. He was bright and curious, always listening and learning. He loved reading books and watching shows in English. When people talked, he understood everything perfectly. But when it was his turn to speak, something strange happened. His mind went blank. His hands would sweat and his heart would race. Words felt stuck somewhere inside him. It wasn't because he didn't know the words. He knew them well. But every time he tried to say something, fear and worry held him back. His teachers praised him for his reading and writing. They would often say, "Ethan, you understand so well. Why don't you speak more?" Ethan would smile politely, but inside he felt sad. It wasn't that he didn't want to talk, he just didn't know how to push through the nervousness. It felt like there was a wall between what he knew and what he could say. He tried speaking in front of a mirror, but it didn't help much. His words still felt clumsy and slow when speaking with others. One day, Ethan met an old man named Mr. Henry at the town library. Mr. Henry was kind and patient. He often saw Ethan reading books in English and smiled at him. One afternoon, Mr. Henry sat next to Ethan and said, "You like English, don't you?" Ethan nodded. "Do you speak it too?" Mr. Henry asked gently. Ethan looked down at his shoes and whispered, "I understand it. I just can't speak it." Mr. Henry gave a warm chuckle. "That's a start, my boy. Understanding is half the battle," he said kindly. "Many people can't even do that. You already have a gift, Ethan. Speaking will come with time, but only if you practice and let go of the fear of making mistakes." Ethan liked Mr. Henry. He felt safe talking to him. So he asked, "What if I say the wrong words?" Mr. Henry smiled again. "We all say the wrong words sometimes. Even people who speak English every day make mistakes. The important thing is to try. The more you try, the easier it will get." From that day on, Ethan began practicing with Mr. Henry. At first, they talked about simple things like the weather or what Ethan read that day. Mr. Henry never corrected Ethan harshly. Instead, he encouraged him, saying, "Good try." Keep going slowly. Ethan started feeling a bit more comfortable. The words began to flow better. Ethan's classmates noticed the change too. One day, during a class presentation, Ethan stood up and spoke in front of everyone. His voice trembled a little, but he kept going. When he finished, the whole class clapped. His teacher smiled proudly and said, "See, Ethan? You did it." Ethan realized that speaking English wasn't about being perfect. It was about expressing himself, making connections, and having the courage to try. He still made mistakes sometimes, but now he didn't let them stop him. Mr. Henry's words echoed in his mind: practice, and don't fear mistakes. This story is not just about Ethan. It's for everyone who understands English but feels too afraid to speak. You're not alone. Remember, understanding is already a big step. Speaking will come with time, practice, and a little patience. If you're listening to this story, I want you to know it's okay to feel nervous. But don't let fear keep you silent. Speak, even if it's not perfect. Keep trying, just like Ethan did. There is so much joy in sharing your thoughts and being understood by others. And this is just the beginning of Ethan's journey. There is still more to learn, more challenges to face, and more victories to celebrate. Ethan's confidence slowly grew, but it wasn't always easy. Some days the words would still feel stuck and frustration would creep in. One afternoon, while practicing with Mr. Henry, Ethan sighed and said, "What if I never get better?" Mr. Henry looked at him with kind eyes and said, "Ethan, learning to speak is like planting a tree. It doesn't grow tall in one day. You water it, give it sunlight, and watch it slowly rise. Some days you'll see progress, and other days nothing changes. But if you keep caring for it, the tree will grow." Ethan held on to those words. Every day, no matter how nervous he felt, he tried to say a few words out loud, even if it was just ordering food at a cafe or greeting a neighbor. At first, it felt awkward. He stumbled over simple words like thank you and hello, but people were kind. They smiled, nodded, and sometimes even helped him finish his sentences. Slowly, Ethan started feeling braver. One day, Ethan's school announced an event, a talent show. Students could perform anything: sing, dance, act, or even give a speech. Ethan wanted to participate, but the thought of speaking in front of an audience terrified him. Still, something inside him whispered, "This is your chance. Try it, even if you're afraid." With Mr. Henry's encouragement, Ethan decided to sign up. He planned to share a short story in English, one he had written himself, about overcoming fears. Every evening, he practiced with Mr. Henry, reading the words slowly, then saying them without looking at the paper. Each time, he improved a little more, though his hands still shook whenever he imagined standing on stage. The day of the talent show arrived. Ethan stood behind the curtain, heart pounding, palms sweaty. What if I mess up? He whispered to Mr. Henry, who had come to support him. Mr. Henry knelt down and said, "Remember, Ethan, this is not about being perfect. It's about sharing what's in your heart. Everyone in the audience wants to listen to you. Even if you stumble, just keep going. Your words matter." Ethan nodded, breathing deeply. When his name was called, he stepped onto the stage, feeling the bright lights on his face. The audience looked huge from up there, and for a moment he wanted to run. But then he saw Mr. Henry in the front row, giving him a thumbs up, and something inside him clicked. He began to speak. The words came slowly at first, his voice shaky, but as he went on, he felt lighter. The story poured out of him, how he used to be scared of speaking English, how every mistake made him feel small, and how meeting Mr. Henry changed everything. The audience listened quietly, nodding along. When Ethan finished, there was a moment of silence, and then the room filled with applause. Ethan blinked in surprise. They were clapping for him. He had done it. For the first time, he felt truly proud of himself, not because he was perfect, but because he had tried. After the show, his classmates came up to him, saying, "You did amazing." Ethan, even his teacher, said, "I knew you had it in you." But the best moment came when Mr. Henry gave him a hug and said, "I'm proud of you, kid. You showed everyone what courage looks like." From that day on, speaking English felt different to Ethan. It wasn't just about using the right words or sounding perfect. It was about connecting with others, sharing stories, and learning as he went. He kept practicing every day, knowing that it was okay to make mistakes. In fact, mistakes became part of the journey. Ethan's story started to inspire others too. His friends, who had also struggled with speaking English, began to feel braver. "If Ethan can do it, so can we," they said to each other. They started practicing together, helping one another without judgment. Their small group grew, and soon it became a place where students felt safe to speak without fear. One day, Ethan's teacher asked him to help a new student named Mia, who had just moved to town and barely spoke any English. "She understands, but she's afraid to speak," the teacher said. Ethan smiled, remembering his own struggles. "I know exactly how that feels," he whispered. Ethan met Mia during lunch and sat beside her. At first, Mia only nodded or shook her head, afraid to say much. Ethan gave her the same advice Mr. Henry had given him: "It's okay to make mistakes. Just try. I'll help you slowly." Mia began to say small things, like hello and thank you each time. Ethan cheered her on, just as Mr. Henry had done for him. Days turned into weeks, and Mia grew more confident. One afternoon, she looked at Ethan and said, "Thank you for not giving up on me." Ethan smiled warmly. "That's what friends are for," he replied. Ethan realized that helping Mia gave him a new kind of joy. It wasn't just about speaking English anymore, it was about making others feel seen and understood. He knew how lonely it could feel to have words trapped inside, and he wanted to help as many people as he could. And so, Ethan's journey continued not just as a learner, but as a mentor, a friend, and a voice of encouragement. There were still days when he struggled, but now he faced those moments with hope instead of fear. He knew that every stumble was a step forward, every mistake a lesson learned. Ethan's life kept changing, one small step at a time. With every conversation, his confidence grew, and so did his friendships. Mia wasn't the only one he helped. Soon, other students, those who felt nervous about speaking English, came to him. Ethan became the person others looked up to, not because he was perfect, but because he understood what it felt like to struggle. One day, Ethan's teacher announced a special class project. "We're starting an international exchange program," she explained. "Each of you will have a chance to talk with students from another country through video calls. It will help us learn about different cultures and improve our communication skills." The class buzzed with excitement, but Ethan felt a knot in his stomach. Talking to someone on a video call, that felt even scarier than speaking in front of his classmates. What if he said the wrong thing? What if they laughed at him? But deep down, he knew that the only way forward was to try. When the day of the first video call arrived, Ethan sat nervously in front of the computer. His group was paired with students from a school in Japan. The call began, and Ethan's classmates greeted their new friends with cheerful hellos and "nice to meet you's." Ethan managed a small wave, his heart pounding in his chest. Then, a boy named Ken from the Japanese school introduced himself. He looked friendly but just as nervous as Ethan. "I understand English, but not good at speaking," Ken admitted with a shy smile. Ethan felt a spark of recognition. He knew exactly what Ken was feeling. Taking a deep breath, Ethan smiled and said, "It's okay." I was the same way. Ken's face brightened. "Really?" he asked. "Yeah," Ethan replied. "I was scared too. But mistakes are okay. We can help each other." Ken nodded, relief washing over him. As the conversation continued, Ethan and Ken stumbled over words and laughed at their mistakes. But something beautiful happened. They kept going, without fear or embarrassment. They talked about their favorite foods, games, and hobbies, learning that they had more in common than they thought. After the call, Ethan realized how much he enjoyed connecting with someone from a different part of the world. It made him see that English wasn't just a school subject, it was a way to build bridges between people, no matter where they came from. Over time, Ethan and Ken became good friends. They exchanged messages regularly, practicing English together while also learning a few Japanese phrases. Ethan even taught his classmates how to say hello and thank you in Japanese, which made Ken smile every time they greeted him. Ethan's world kept expanding. He no longer saw speaking English as something scary. It was a tool that opened doors to new friendships and exciting experiences. One day, his teacher approached him with another opportunity. "There's a public speaking contest coming up," she said. "I think you'd be great at it. What do you say?" Ethan's first instinct was to say no. A contest. That sounded terrifying. But then he remembered Mr. Henry's advice: practice and don't fear mistakes. He also thought about Ken and all the others he had helped along the way. What if he could inspire even more people by sharing his story? After a long moment, Ethan looked up and gave his teacher a small, determined smile. "Okay," he said, "I'll do it." In the weeks leading up to the contest, Ethan worked hard. He wrote a speech about his journey, how he had once been too scared to speak, and how small steps, practice, and kindness had changed everything. Mr. Henry helped him rehearse, just like before. Remember, Mr. Henry told him, "It's not about winning. It's about telling your story." The day of the contest arrived, and Ethan found himself standing on another stage, facing an audience much larger than the one at the talent show. His hands trembled, but this time it was different. He wasn't just speaking for himself, he was speaking for everyone who had ever felt too afraid to use their voice. Ethan took a deep breath and began his speech. He spoke slowly, clearly, and from the heart. He talked about fear, mistakes, and the power of trying. He shared how people like Mr. Henry, Mia, and Ken had shown him that learning isn't about perfection, it's about connection. When he finished, the room filled with applause once again. But this time, something even more amazing happened. After the contest, several students came up to him and said, "I feel the same way. Thank you for sharing your story." Ethan realized that his words had made a difference. He had touched the hearts of others just by being honest and brave. The judges announced the results, and Ethan won second place. But to him, it felt like first. The real victory was knowing that his story mattered and that he had found his voice. As Ethan walked off the stage, he saw Mr. Henry waiting for him, beaming with pride. "You did it, kid," Mr. Henry said, giving him a high five. "You spoke, and the world listened." Ethan smiled, feeling lighter than ever before. His journey wasn't over. There were still new challenges to face and more people to help. But he knew now that he had the courage to face whatever came next.